I want to swing. I want to swing to Charlotte and start with OKC though. So OKC picks up Gordon Hayward. So they make a good move. It's a great fit for them if he plays, if he can be healthy. He's got good size. They need some size, especially on the wing. They just need a bigger body. And Mo, I want to go to you first because you've been hollering all season. They need a big. They need a big. They need some size. They didn't get it. Is this a failure at trade deadline day for them?
I mean, I think failure is probably a strong word, but they just didn't get done what they needed to get done. Like, listen, Gordon Hayward's fine if he plays. He's only played 25 games this year. He hasn't played more than 70 games since freaking 1982. I don't know, like 2019. But like, he rarely plays. He's very unreliable in terms of health and all that stuff. And the prime of Gordon Hayward, yeah, that is great. And I think we all love what that would have been. But I don't know if that's what you're getting there. And they don't necessarily even need that from him. But look, man, like I watched this team up close against the Clippers. They looked outmatched size-wise. I think when you're in a conference, when you got to go up against Denver, and yes, they're 1-3 they're 3-1 versus Denver this season. I still don't think that matters come playoff time. You up against the Lakers. The Lakers have beaten them twice already, and that's a really pretty bad team. I think you're up against so much size in the Western Conference. Like Chet can't do it all alone. In that sense, there were so many guys I wished, and maybe maybe the trades weren't there, but I wish they went after guys and they had enough assets there. I didn't feel like they needed to make a massive trade, but they needed to go get a big guy in that sense, a guy that can get rebounds for them, a guy that can help them board, help them defend a little bit more at the rim, and kind of just help Chet out so he doesn't have to do it all.
Just a quick aside, I think that there's been some research in the past that them being 3-1 versus the Nuggets. Historically, that indicates a slightly higher percentage chance than if you just took the teams overall. Like I think it's probably gives them about a 2% higher chance of winning a series than you would just based on sort of who has home court and the team's overall resume. So it's not nothing, but it's not, as you say, it's not a massive deal. I think that a move that we liked for the team that made it was the Xavier Tillman pickup, and that like. OKC doing something like that. I think a guy who would have been really interesting for them. And speaking of teams that are not, kind of the opposite of Detroit, who's mashing buttons, a team that's kind of has unplugged the controller is the Bulls, and Andre Drummond would have been, I think, a really interesting, option.
Mo got me on the Jakob Poeltl train. And I think that could have been a really good pick. I mean, Mo just said that, and I was like, oh yeah, that fits. That actually is kind of right because he doesn't have to start. It still allows them to play their way. And Andrew, look, all year long, you've said the Thunder, they like who they are, they like their guys, they like how they play. And if they brought someone in, it needed to be maybe a Kelly Olynyk type that could fill that, stretch role, move the ball, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You still feel good about that?
I mean, they're at the top of the West right now. I mean, you have to feel pretty good about it. They've been really good, and they know it's not like you ask the front office like, "Hey, what are you guys going to do about the rebound?" They know that the rebounding is a problem. The thing is, they were never going to deal for an Andre Drummond, Xavier Tillman type of guy. Like they just never were. They want to play the way they play, and you have to be that kind of guy. And that's why Hayward makes sense for them because he can shoot past dribble. He can play within the flow of their offense. That's what they wanted more of that. And basically they dealt away guys that weren't going to play in the playoffs or a guy that could potentially play in the playoffs. Now, is this like a home run for them? I don't think it's a home run for them. I think it's a good trade for them because they traded guys that weren't going to play plus a couple seconds to get a guy who could potentially fill a role for them. If he's hurt, would anybody be surprised? No one would be surprised. But they have guys that they still like there. Mostly what they wanted to do going into this year for the playoffs is to see what they have. They want to see what these guys are in the playoffs. This group has not been in a playoff game together yet. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been in the playoffs twice, but not as the main guy. And so what does that look like? How does Chet fare in the playoffs? What does this look like? They want to play 5 out. They want to just dribble drive people to death. That's what they want to do. If you put a big guy in the middle of that, honestly, we don't even know what it looks like because they just have never even done it. And they don't want to do it. And so if you want a big man in Oklahoma City, make it a big man that can shoot, because that's what they want there. That's how they want to organize their offense. They don't want a like traditional Clint Capella, Pirtle, rim running kind of big that's going to be in the paint. They just don't.
Yeah, I think that's short-sighted on a lot of levels, and I want to break it down on a couple ways because it's this sense of like, I'm with you. They don't need to, like everybody who was saying they needed to make a massive trade, I thought was out of their depth. They do need to see what these guys have, but also give yourself a chance to, hey, man, maybe we can have a big run. You just said it. You're on top of the West, but we're going to use this playoff as an exploratory sort of situation. You don't know what's on the other side. You don't know what next season brings. You don't know where that stuff goes. When you have the chances, you go for it. I think the one thing that they're missing, and that I think that everybody in OKC is missing, is playoff versatility matters. And it's huge. You cannot play one way in the NBA playoffs. You can't. We've seen it too many times from guys, because this is what they're going to learn. Teams are going to lock down. They're going to figure out how they go. It's a big difference when you get to play a lot of teams on the second night of a back-to-back or whatnot, or, whatever. Like it's playoffs are so different in that environment. It's much more controlled, and teams get to scout a lot harder and a lot tougher. And you're right. They don't know what they have in these guys, but you're already on top of the West. It's a 3-way, almost 4-way tie by half a game for that. So you don't know where you're going to end up in that sense, but you're probably going to have home court advantage in the first round at the very least, if not more. Give yourself a chance. And again, you didn't have to make a massive haul in that sense. And if the idea is, hey, we're only looking at bigs who can shoot threes, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, because I think you need to have a rim runner. You think it makes a big difference. It also makes Shea's life a little bit easier. It also makes guys like Giddey's life a little bit easier. Jalen Williams' life easier when they come off the pick and roll and having a lob threat. It also sucks in the defense and it kicks out to your shooters in all of those situations. Like there's a lot of things there. Just have an idea, and having one big won't clog the lane. I promise you. I've done enough scouting. I've done it. I've done the homework. It won't clog the lanes where there'll be no driving lanes for Shea. I promise.
And also, it's a curveball, right? Like it's if you're playing smaller, stretch the floor faster, having a big that you can bring in, that you can trust. I mean, it's a curveball. It means that, like when you go against the Denver Nuggets, you've got someone to throw at Jokic, because Chet is not going to be able to do that. And I don't think they've got a 4 like Gordon Hayward. If he's playing the 4, not going to be able to do it. So again, like it's not about this season.
The way
I understand not giving up stuff, right?
Yeah,
but
they weren't going to give up anything, and they also weren't going to. They also don't deal with Jokic with one guy. It's always by committee, and that's how their paint defense has been for the last few years. It's like all by committee. It's all like double and scramble. It's like the way that they do it. I mean, the way they defend too. I mean, I just don't think, and maybe they eventually will do this, is acquire somebody who plays different than they do. I don't think they were going to do that at this deadline. And I certainly don't think they were going to acquire a big who doesn't play the way that they play at this deadline.
I get what you're saying, and I think Mo was very astute in pointing out that, and you guys were both in that, figuring out, okay, how does this style look? How does Shea look like as the dude in a playoff series? How does Chet like hold up to the physicality of the playoffs? That's valuable information. I think that some of the better moves we saw, like a lot of the better moves we saw, aside from the Knicks, were sort of kind of small ball, situational, put the club in the bag moves. And I think Boston made a couple of those. And I think that's much more what we're talking about than like send a first round pick. I mean, it's a team that's a wash in first and second round picks. What would it really have cost them if they had made the same offer that Boston did for Xavier Tillman, for example, just to have that club in the bag, to say, all right, Chet, we're going to give you 10 minutes tonight where you don't have to get banged on by Jokic in the post on defense every possession. Like just having that, I think, would have some value to them. And I do think that they are smart to like be a little bit circumspect, because the Clippers and the Nuggets are right there at the top, know who they are. That's not going to be forever. Now they have an opportunity this year, but they have several years of opportunity. So I understand not like, well, if we backed up the truck, could we get Scotty Barnes or something like that?
Right. I also think they want to go the complete other direction that everybody thinks they should go. And they kind of have done this when they've played the Timberwolves, and it's worked sometimes and it hasn't worked other times. But instead of like a big spelling Chet, they just play Kenrich at the 5. And they like that look, and like statistically that look has been really good for them over the last 2 seasons. And so they would almost like rather just go the exact other way than what everybody thinks they should do. And I think there's just like a genuine curiosity of what happens when we do this. Does it? And maybe the answer is it doesn't work, And I think that there's a distinct possibility that it won't. And honestly, if the Thunder don't win the championship, the inclination is this, that everybody's going to say the rebounding and the size is the problem. No matter what happens, that's going to be where people turn when the Thunder inevitably lose in the playoffs at some point this year. Like that's going to happen. And it may be right. It may be the right answer, but I'm just curious to see the way that it plays out.
I would just say, just look at Toronto trying to play last season without a center. I think we know the answer.
Yeah, by the way, I will say this of the organizations that are doing experiments. I mean, I think OKC has probably like earned the right to be able to experiment a little bit without too much scrutiny. Not that we don't scrutinize it, but you know what I mean. It's just it's a longer term process, and they've made good decisions.
I just think they could have given themselves more of a chance without it actually affecting anything long term. And I think that was and it was a simple move. And if you didn't like the way it looked, don't play the guy. That's it.
I think that's totally fair. I think it's totally fair. I think the guy that I would have gone after, and it didn't cost a whole lot to get him, the Thunder actually ended up moving one of these picks anyways, was for Kelly Olynyk. Like if they were, instead of like trying to get involved in this Mavs deal, which I think they actually ended up in a really good spot with what they got in this trade. It's pretty absurd. And we'll go there. But I think you could have also, like, if you wanted to push in a little bit more this year, you could have flipped that pick for Olynyk, because obviously that's what it cost. It cost them. It's that other pick, which nobody wants, apparently. It's been flipped like 5 times since last summer. But it finally ended up in Utah. But you could have gotten him. And I think he's the kind of guy he kind of is the intersection of all these things, like size. He can shoot, he can pass, he can handle a little bit. He can do all these like little things that the Thunder want their big guys to do. But he ends up where all the Canadians go. So
that one doesn't make any sense. The other side of this trade, Charlotte, Seth, this was not a good trade for Charlotte.
It feels like negative value for an expiring contract. I mean, I guess give or take what you think of Trey Mann, as with again one upfront extension starting next season with half a season to evaluate him, and then taking on money, like not a ton of money, but still taking on money next year from Bertans and it was Micic. So like, we often say, well, it's better to get something for nothing than an expiring. Sometimes you can get less than nothing, and from where I sit, it feels like they got negative value for moving off of Hayward's expiring.